So the game Ready or Not came out on December 17th, 2021 and stayed in early access for almost 2 whole years until December 13th, 2023. And now we're coming up to December 2024, meaning that it's been almost a year since it's been in full release. And I've been meaning to play this game for a long time, and I've only heard good things about it, to be honest. I was just waiting for the best time to check it out, and now that I know it's been in full release, I've finally got around to playing it, and I'm so glad I have. And honestly, it's probably the most fun and the most enjoyment I've got out of a game in a long time. The only sort of reason why you probably wouldn't like this game, in my opinion, is if you're not a fan of that gameplay style. So the main reason why I'm doing this review is for anyone that is just unsure about what the game is and the gameplay, or just wants to look a bit more into it. Now, if you don't know what Ready or Not is, it's basically a first-person tactical shooter game, and it's set in very linear maps and very linear gameplay style, where you play as a SWAT team leader, and your goal is to respond to a bunch of different emergencies and to put them under control. And I think like the best part about it, and just what makes it so unique from any other FPS game, because of course we've seen this style of gameplay a bunch of times, but what makes this one so different is that it's so good in the immersion and how they just nailed the realistic gameplay style. And that's from the graphics, of course, because it is a recent game, so if we're just looking at the visuals, then it's of course going to be top tier, but it's not of course all about that. Even just the topics actually covered and how, you know, realistic they are, it is actual stuff that does happen. It's not, you know, overly unrealistic. And of course the sound effects, the music, that could be, you know, the gunshots, the radio in your ear, the other SWAT members, the civilians screaming. There's so much attention to detail. And then of course the visuals as well, where they know how to set the tone of the game, especially in terms of the lighting. So when you go through these variety of levels, a lot of them genuinely feel chilling to play and scary to play because of how well they nailed that immersive atmosphere. And in a way, if we look at it at face value in terms of the actual plot of the game and just what you do in the game, some could say it's very simple, which in a way it is, but because of just the variety of maps and missions and just the amount of topics they cover, you are always invested. And like I said, I've never been that gripped into a game in such a long time, and just how clever they made the AI and the amount of work and effort they put into the map design. A lot of the maps I just love. There's not one that I hate really. As I mentioned earlier, they're all very linear as well. There's a couple open areas in some of them which is fine, but they really did do a good job at just designing the layout, and they did of course really think about it, and that's what makes it so fun, even though the actual, you know, concept is very simple. Because there's been loads of these sort of games, but, you know, comparing it to a Rainbow Six Siege or a COD campaign, in a way they sort of aspire to be this sort of game. And of course you do get a rating at the end of each mission and level, so what's great is that you can always, you know, do better next time, because there's no way you're getting the S tier on every single one each time. So that also adds to that replayability for a game that again is quite simple, but at the same time just grips you in so well. It's set in the fictional area of basically Los Angeles, called Los Sueños, and then you have the main SWAT officer building as your main lobby, where you'll be starting the next missions and, you know, modifying your loadout. And depending on how much you play and how well you do when you play these missions, you can unlock different parts of your gear, but mainly just in terms of the appearance, which is good. You won't have to do a bunch of grinding to unlock different weapons and attachments. Basically all of that is given to you right off the back, which I think is great because it adds on to that replayability again, because you can always switch up your gameplay by switching in and out different weapons. But one of the most important and biggest aspects is how you basically just go about the mission, because of course you can go all out guns blazing and not even care about what's a civilian and what isn't, but you won't really be getting the most fun out of that. And pretty much all the missions I played, even if I replayed them, I just tried my hardest, and because it's so good at gripping you in, you actually want to, whether that be playing by yourself in solo and then with AI or with a friend. There's certain people that you should leave alone and just restrain them, so as you approach them you can press F on the keyboard or whatever it is on controller, and then that will shout at them, and it's so good in terms of just the voice acting with how they shout, and then they get on the ground and surrender. And of course you're only doing it for your safety, and you basically have to restrain all the civilians, but of course you don't always know who is a civilian and who isn't, so you have to slowly approach it. You can't rush the missions basically. Of course you can, but again that takes away that immersion, and that's the best part about it. It's just taking your time and going slow and tactical, because at the end of the day it is a tactical shooter, so you want to be so strategic and tactical about it, and that's when you get the best gameplay. And of course you can actually stop and control the behaviour of some of the enemies, or the suspects should I say. But they can, and just like in real life, be very unpredictable. You don't always know if they're going to put their hands up straight away or if they're just going to not care and carry on shooting. So you have to be extremely cautious in your gameplay, and there's a variety of ways you can do this. So of course you can shout before they actually start shooting, and sometimes not, they will drop their gun and surrender. A lot of the time it depends on the actual mission itself and who they are. As an example, the Mind Jot data center mission, when you infiltrate a server building, and because they're so used to getting robbed all the time, and a lot of the time they do say that, the actual civilians, they do shout out that they're used to getting robbed all the time. Just so many little details that you actually have to listen out about what they're talking about, which just adds a lot more to the story of the game and just the overall immersion once again. I feel like I will be repeating that word a lot, but it's honestly the best way to describe it. And of course there is a good amount of lore to it as well that goes a lot deeper the more you go into it. But as I was saying, because they're so used to getting robbed, they're just defending themselves, so they're not always going to be a threat. And I think all of the people you can actually stop and they will surrender in that mission. But then other missions like Carriers of the Vine, which takes place in this rural sort of vine farm, and the actual word Carriers of the Vine are the people there and they're cultists who are a enemy faction, so a lot of the time they will always fight back no matter what. So just from those two examples you can see the comparison and how different each mission is and just the variety they put into it, which is why you always just don't know what to expect, and it's always so unpredictable, and it's your job to control it to the best of your ability, just like a real SWAT member. There's a variety of gadgets you can use. So there's a door camera which you can place under a door and look through to the other side before you open it, which is very useful so you know what is on the other side before you open it. And to actually open the doors, a lot of them, the majority of the time, are locked depending on the mission. So you can pick the lock with your lockpick, you can shoot the handle, you can kick the door down, you can shoot the door. There's so many different ways. And then if you're playing with AI, you can of course do a lot of things to control them and just order them to do stuff. It's good because I've actually played on both sides. I've played with AI and with a friend, so I got those two experiences. So I feel like this is a great review to have. In terms of my experience playing with the AI, they're not bad. One of the best teammate AIs I have seen in a game, that's for sure. I think probably the last one I played was a Ubisoft game, so that says enough. So to see that comparison is great. You can order them to do so much stuff, it's insane. So you have your team which is split up into the red team and the blue team, and then when you order with the middle mouse button, of course I played on keyboard, you can switch between the two teams, and you could say for the whole team to breach a door, or just half the team to breach the door. You can split them up and have one over there, one to the other side. Then when you're just progressing through and walking through, you can order them to get in a certain formation around you. That could be single file, double file, a diamond formation. There's so much to do, and then they can stack up on a door. There's multiple ways they can breach it, and you order them to do that. Just like the examples I mentioned that you can do yourself, you can order your AI to do that exact thing. Because you are the leader, so they will listen to you, and they don't just breach a door by themselves, you have to tell them to do that. Then of course, restraining certain civilians and suspects, you can order them to do that, or they'll just eventually do it themselves. And when you do restrain people, if they drop a gun, you have to hide the evidence, which they can use for reporting. I think what I use the most in terms of the AI is how they clear a room. So you can order them to clear a room in many different ways, and if you again split the two teams up, and this goes with anything, you could have one side clear one room and then another room another side, and actually queue them both at the same time. It's great, and you can do multiple things at one time. So as I said, you can order them to clear a room, and that could be shoot the lock and then flash it and then clear it, or they could just kick the door down, clear the room with a launcher, like a grenade launcher. Just such a variety of ways to use the AI, which genuinely makes it fun, rather than just them following you and just letting the AI do anything. So it does feel like, even though you are playing with AI, it doesn't feel like a solo game, because you are ordering them to do a bunch of different stuff that it actually is quite fun to do, which is crazy to think about. Because a lot of the time, as I mentioned, AI isn't amazing in terms of teammates, but because of how much you can do and how much, responsibility you have, whether you play with a friend or AI, it's both quite fun. But I must admit, I did have a lot more fun playing playing with other online players. So that is something to maybe take into account. But of course, as I said, AI is completely fine either way. But I think if I just had to choose, I definitely would say with online players. But I think that's self-explanatory with any game really. But of course, it's also personal preference. And if you do play with a friend, if they've done a mission, you can actually play their mission, even if you haven't gotten to that point, because I forgot to mention that you can't just have all the missions at once straight away. You have to do it in order. So there's 18 maps in total, and you unlock one each time you do one. And because it's so realistic, this also means that the actual difficulty is quite realistic as well. I wouldn't say you're a bullet sponge, a few shots and then you're dead, and that's the same with the enemies as well. And to get a good score, a lot of the time you have to be careful in how you actually take down a suspect or even a civilian, because as I mentioned, if you kill a civilian, that is going to definitely drop points, because you shouldn't do that. But even if you do kill a suspect, a lot of the time, depending on what they do, it's usually best if you just incapacitate them and then restrain them rather than just, shoot them dead. But of course, it's sometimes very difficult to actually control that. In the heat of the moment, it's very hard to do that. But the way they want you to play, and just like in real life, is, cause the less havoc as possible and control the situation. And one of the guns that you can use is a beanbag shotgun, which is again something they use in real life and basically wins the person rather than actually kill them, because all it is a beanbag. Because it's going at a fast rate, it's going to win them and they just can't do anything and they will slump to the floor. And of course, you can shoot them once, that isn't going to kill them, but it is possible for them to also bleed out as well. But this is all, again, just so unpredictable. You don't always know what's going to happen in a game. And each game, even though it's so linear and straightforward, just like I said, it's always so different each time. And there's so many ways you can go about it, and you can always receive a better or worse score than the last time, depending on how you play. But of course, over time, and I saw it as well, you learn different strategies and different ways to go about stuff. And trying to do it in the cleanest way and stealthiest way possible was my favourite thing. I think that's the best part of it. And of course, you can use throwable weapons as well, like flash and frag grenades, C2s, and then you can also use a shield as well. And that's great that you can also modify your AI team, so you can completely control their loadout, their primary weapons, their sidearms, their gadgets and their throwables as well. And it's always good to have at least one with a riot shield. And what's great is that when they are infiltrating a room, if you tell them to do that, they will switch around in the right position so that the person with the riot is at the front. I think that's so cool. And looking back into that realism again, it's also great in terms of the actual gunplay. The guns always vary in their weight and they're very, good to handle, but they don't feel like, pea shooters. Like it's hard to describe it in words, to be honest. You have to play the game to actually have a feel of the gunplay, but it just feels so realistic, which I expected from everything else in the game. You're going to expect the gunplay to also be that realistic. They don't feel light and they don't feel fast. They all have a lot of weight to them and they're very sturdy to hold, if that makes sense. It's weird to describe, but they did a very good job at it. And I always used the assault rifles. Sometimes I used a shotgun, the beanbag shotgun, and then I'd switch to a sidearm of a pistol. And the attachments, you can add, flashlights and laser pointers. Nothing crazy, there's not a massive amount of attachments, which I think is good, to be honest, but just a few to add on just to improve the experience. And the flashlights are good, of course, because of dark areas, and something that they can do is actually plant bombs onto the door, so you have to be careful when peeking a door that the bomb doesn't go off. But a lot of the time that is quite rare, but it can definitely happen. And the actual enemy types, they only sort of vary in the mission you play, so the actual suspects, they're all going to be the same and they're going to play the same in the same mission. If you go into another one, as I mentioned, they're always different, but there is maybe the odd one thrown in there. So as an example, I don't know if it happens on any other missions, but Neon Tomb is a nightclub mission and loud music is playing all around you. It's so fun, but of course you do have to concentrate and it's hard to do that with all the music blaring, and you can actually find the place to turn it off. But basically some of the people in there, and it might just be one, actually have bomb vests on, so they can actually set that off. It only happened once in my playthrough, but that's what I mean by like a random, enemy type thrown in there. And just looking into the maps very quickly, of course I'm not going to go through each individual one, but I'll go through some of my favourites and some of my least favourites. I think the first mission and the map, which is a gas station, it's so simple and so small, and it's the first one you play, so it's great at just setting the tone of the game. It's also incredibly easy as well, but I just thought it was great to set it off. I mean, there's nothing wrong about it, and it's such a good layout as well, but also very small. Like, it's not very open, it's not a lot to it, but it's just simple but also perfect in a way. And I think the highest I've got on that is an A+. I'm going to be playing this, of course, after the review, and I can't wait to try and S-tier everything, but because it's also small, is that it sort of makes it that more intense as well because it's so, claustrophobic. And it does work quite well as a first mission because you don't have to spend ages looking for someone or something, because a few of the maps are quite big, like the college one, there's a hospital one as well. So it's good that the first mission wasn't, so overwhelming for the first player. Those missions that are a lot more complex are some of my favourites. So Cherryessa Farm, which is the one I spoke about earlier, which is Carriers of the Vine, there's so much to that. There's like 3 or 4 main locations in that one map. So there's like a forest area with a giant church that you can go in. There's the giant farm around it as well. There's a massive underground cellar, and it's not like a small room, it's literally under everything. It takes up almost the whole map. And there's multiple buildings and greenhouses everywhere. I think there's another main church as well, which you end the game in. And some people might not enjoy that because there's a lot to it, but I was quite a big fan of it. I also just loved the look of it. There was so much detail. And those sort of maps, they get that because there's just so much to put into it. And they really just didn't miss anything. Even just areas that you're not going to even see again, you just run past, like some of the greenhouses. Just the detail, the attention to detail they put into it with the different plants and, the fruit they're growing and stuff. It's insane. And just the colours as well. I love the colours of that map. It's such like a warm sort of autumny feeling. And it also, because of the whole cult thing and just where it's set as well, it reminds me a lot of Midsummer, if you know what I'm talking about. And if you've played that map and if you've watched that film, you definitely see that resemblance, or at least get that vibe. There's also a lot of suspects on that map as well because it is like a cult, so there's going to be a lot of people compared to the other maps, which of course isn't going to be for everyone. And it's good that they do have some small maps, some big maps, but my favourite thing is just the variety of all the maps, from the sizes and the layout of them, and actually what you do, the topics they cover. There's just so much stuff. Another one I love is Valley of the Dolls. Again, a lot of that is just the look of it, like the whole mansion design is just how modern it is and that architecture, but just the whole layout, you can really go quickly through it, so you're just running on adrenaline. Of course, the neon nightclub, which I mentioned, is just great. I love the look of it with all the different lights and the music blaring. Just so much is going on. There's Sins of the Father, which is like a massive hotel, and oh my god, the architecture in that is incredible because it's so modern, so there's so many shiny bits, and that also means there's a lot of reflections, so many narrow hallways and everything. It genuinely feels like a horror game because of how linear it is. So many different rooms you can go in, and the rain outside with, lights shining through the windows and reflections. Just the mood and the atmosphere they set. I don't want to talk too much about what the missions actually are and what you do in the missions because it sort of spoils it in a way, so I'd rather talk about the actual map itself. Another one of my favourites just to mention is Bryza Cove. Again, lovely architecture and the look of it and how modern it is, but also it's probably one of my favourite layouts. It's all set, I think, on one floor if I remember, but there's so many different rooms to go in, and just they know how to build a layout of a map. It also means there's a bunch of different, nooks and crannies to hide in and peek corners, which is basically what you want with this sort of gameplay style. But I think that is going to be where I end it for this review. I had a bunch of fun playing this game and I will carry on to. And as I mentioned, it's genuinely the most fun I've had on a game in a long time. But this game just nailed everything. And I was gripped straight away, whether that be with AI or with friends. And it just knows how to draw you in. So in a way, it hasn't even been a year since it's been out, but as in the full release. I usually wait until it's been around like over 2 years or so. But then I realised that it has been out in early access before that. So I thought now was a great time to do a review on it. And I think everyone should check this game out, honestly. Because as I said, the only reason I would say to not play it is if you aren't a fan, like you definitely aren't a fan of this gameplay style. But if you're even thinking about it and you like what you see, then definitely go check it out. You won't regret it, I don't think. So that's where I end my review on Ready or Not in 2024. I'll probably be doing some shorts on the game as well. If you did enjoy this video, then let me know by tapping that like button down below. And if you enjoy single player and multiplayer games as well, then I have a bunch of playlists on the channel from a variety of games, so you can subscribe to the channel if you'd like to. If you'd like to support me any further, then you can become a member at either level 1 or 2 to gain access to various perks. Then tap the join button on the channel. Thank you all for the support and watching until the very end. And that was Ready or Not in 2024, and bye bye.